Well, we are going to go ahead and get started. My name is Solandia Hammond, affectionately known as Sue Ham Baby, and I am excited to have with me tonight on this call Dr. Dennis Kimbrough. I tell you, I read his book, The Wealth Choice, and I was just blown away. And so immediately, I just had to get to him and ask him for an interview, and I'm so thankful that he's obliged. Let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Dennis Kimbrough, for those of you that may not know. He spent his entire career interviewing peak performers all over the world and gleaning their best ideas, strategies, and success principles from their words. He's heard the same things enough times to know that all people who succeed tend to follow the same path, and that all people who have not succeeded yet tend to fall into the same pit over and over again. Now, Dr. Kimbrough is a best-selling author of 5 books, a writing partner and a master trainer for the prestigious Napoleon Hill Foundation, and is on the faculty at Clark Atlanta University School of Business Administration. He's a recipient of the Dale Carnegie Personal Achievement Award. He received his BA degree from the University of Oklahoma and a MA and doctorate from Northwestern University, where he studied wealth and poverty in underdeveloped countries. Now, in 2005, the great thing about Dr. Dennis Kimbrough is the Black MBA Association presented him with the 2005 H. Naylor Fitzhugh Award, recognizing him as one of the top professors in the nation. And I could go on and on and on and on and on, but I am going to let Dr. Dennis Kimbrough tell us some more about himself, because we want to find out just how he became a part of the Napoleon Hill Foundation. But before we get into that, I have to extend my hospitality and say thank you, Dr. Dennis Kimbrough, for being a part of this call.
Oh, Shalandria, I am honored. Thank you very much. You and your team could have selected anybody and reached out and connected with me, and I am just happy to oblige.
Oh, my goodness. Please call me Sue Ham. I would say it like Sue Ham Baby, but I'm going to just say Sue Ham.
Sue Ham it is, child. You want to be Sue Ham, you can be Sue Ham all you want.
I love it. I love it. Now, I have to ask you, because like I said, I read your book, the current book that you now have out, Wealth Choice. And I'm telling you, I really could not put this book down. And I was, my son's father was in here, my best friend, and I was just reading excerpts of the book. And I was like, oh, my God, I can't believe this. And he's like, what book are you reading? And I was like, Dr. Dennis Kimbrough's Wealth Choice. It was a book that was suggested to me by one of my Facebook friends, Shoner Johnson. And so I was like, don't worry about it. When I'm finished reading it, you can just get my iPad and read it on Kindle. And he was like, I'm about to download it right now the way you're carrying on. So.
Wow. Well, it's making quite a name for itself, and I don't mind sharing with you. It's really the #1 book in Black America, though the principles are applicable to anybody. But Suham, it's a 7-year effort. And like you mentioned in the intro, for 7 years, I just went around the country, and I'm very specific in my respondent list and respondent base. I only wanted black millionaires. When Martin Luther King led the Montgomery bus boycott in the late 1950s, there were only 5 black millionaires in the United States. I interviewed 3 of the 5 and shared their story in Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice. Today, you have 35,000 black millionaires and 5 black billionaires in the United States, and I shared many of the stories based on face-to-face interviews, focus groups, and a full-blown survey. So I guess it's a book whose time has come and is more than apropos, because when you look at Black America, again, though the book is for anybody, but when you look at Black America and you look at every economic indicator that would lead to prosperity or financial success, if we aren't in last place, we're next to last place. So the wealth choice may not be the best choice, but for so many of us, it's our only choice.
And, I love the fact that it is applicable to Black America. But when I read the book, I was just blown away, because I hadn't realized that there were so many blacks that had done so many phenomenal things. But for you listeners that are not black, trust me, the principles that we're going to cover tonight, they are applicable to anyone who is striving to be a millionaire or to just be in a better financial status. Now, Dr. Kimbrough, I got to read you something from The Wealth Choice. Now, you wrote, more than 25 years ago, my father died absolutely broke, despite attending college and working nonstop for nearly 30 years. I remembered wondering how in a country brimming with opportunities and endless possibilities, anyone could work so hard during his or her life and end up with little or nothing before falling into the lap of Social Security. Now, I have to ask you, growing up, seeing your father like that, is that what placed you into the position of wanting to help Black Americans, to have something? Because you're right. So many of us work all of our lives, and we end up with nothing.
Well, and again, it goes back to, and I'm glad you sort of plucked that out of the book. What was lacking with my father were a number of factors. Number one, opportunity. I mean, here's a man who for 4 years of his life dodged bullets in Europe during World War II. He and his generation and African-American males come back from Europe after defending this country. Number one, can't get a job because of the color of the skin. Number two, no one is going to, avail them of a home mortgage, so they can't own a home. Though we lived in New Jersey, he's got relatives down south who can't vote because of the color of the skin. But that wasn't going to hold him back in terms of his love for the country, because when I began to cite all the obstacles and challenges that were thrown in his path by the government, he says to me, young man, I don't ever want to hear, badmouth this country. In other words, he knew opportunities were out there, and he knew that times, and this is what he would do. Suham, every Sunday, my dad would shine his shoes and get ready for the following week, the upcoming week, like someone's going to pluck him out and offer him an opportunity. But the bottom line is he was ready, and he would always say to me, you got to be ready, because times like these won't be as hard on the Negro. Son, you got to be ready. And he was so right. Martin Luther King knew that these times weren't always going to be tough, and opportunities were going to come our way. I tell my students at Clark Atlanta, Suham, that this is the first generation. These students that I stand before every Tuesday and Thursday, I said, from the first African Americans who came on these shores in 1618 to today, here is a generation, number one, never heard the word no. Here is a generation that was never forced to the back of the line. Here is a generation where if they walked into a restaurant, they would never hear that phrase, "We don't serve your kind." If they ever walked into a movie theater, no one ever placed them in the balcony because of the color of their skin. So, I got to see a little bit more ROI from this generation, return on investment. I got to see a little bit more passion. I got to see a little bit more energy. And I got to see them on a quest, as the good book says, to live life and to live it abundantly. And when the book says to live it abundantly, Suham, it doesn't mean high-end, Gucci and Prada and Aguilada. Yeah. It doesn't mean that. It means what you said early in the introduction, to seize possibilities. We've only got two goals in life. Goal number one, always to stand at the right hand of God, always to find truth. And goal number two, to see the light. Because when you see the light, you will raise your standard of living. Two simple goals, but so difficult for far too many.
Wow. That's deep. That's very profound. And like you said, when you see the light, you're going to raise your goals. You're going to raise your standard of living. That definitely happened for me. Now, for people who do not know, you've got to tell them the story of how you came to finish Napoleon Hill's transcripts for Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice. You've got to tell them who Mr. Stone was and, about the whole ordeal. Of course, I read it in your book, but I'd just like for you to share it with the listeners out there, how this came into existence, your meeting with the Napoleon Hill Foundation. And explain who Napoleon Hill is.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? I'm glad you brought that up, because so many people to this day, they want to know, how did you get your name on Napoleon Hill's book? And even some go as far as saying, how did you rip Napoleon Hill like I ripped it off? I didn't call W. Clement Stone and the Napoleon Hill Foundation. They called me. I was going around this country, interviewing peak performing African-American high achievers, leaders. Wasn't concentrating so much on wealth, but those who made a difference for themselves, African-Americans, for a book that I was writing. And Suham, it was going to be my first book. And it was, the title of the book was What Makes the Great Great. That was going to be my first book. That's the book that I was working on. And because that book was the first of its type,